On today's show, why are the Golden State Warriors struggling after a hot start to the season? Just 3-7 in their last 10 games, including a 6-game losing streak, plus an altercation, if you want to call it that, between Chris Paul and Scott Foster, a long-standing beef there, resulting in Chris Paul being ejected in the Warriors' most recent loss against the Phoenix Suns. We're going to break it all down coming up right here at Locked On NBA.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up and welcome to another edition of Locked On NBA, the biggest stories with the local experts. I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, also host of Locked On Rockets right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now, today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. They're the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports because it's just you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, you just pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 players and their stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. Prize Picks is so simple to play. You can make your picks and submit an entry in less than 60 seconds. They've got quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types, which is what makes Prize Picks the #1 DFS app on the market. And with basketball season here, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League, a league created specifically for combo projections that include 2 or more players from different sports or leagues. For example, you can do LeBron James plus Travis Kelce at a 10.5 combo of 3-pointers made plus reception. So if you've been thinking about getting into daily fantasy sports, you've got to check out Prize Picks. So go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use code LockedOnNBA, all lowercase, for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, that's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks is daily fantasy sports made easy. Joining us now is the host of Locked On Warriors, Cyrus Saatsaz. You can track down wherever you listen to your podcasts and on YouTube. Just search Locked On Warriors. And Cyrus, a lot to talk about with these Golden State Warriors because they've been kind of reeling as of late. Just 3-7 in their last 10. They had a 6-game losing streak, and then they also had the huge blow-up altercation, whatever you want to call it, between Chris Paul and Scott Foster, which we're going to get into some of that beef a little bit later on. But let's start with the Warriors and some of their recent struggles. They had they won a game at home against my Houston Rockets to break up that losing streak. But what kind of went into some of that 6-game skid? A lot of those happening at home. What's going on there?
Yeah, good point on that, because they started the season 6-2. Almost all of those wins were on the road. I think they were 5-1 on the road to start the year. And, you know, the road games were the concern from last year because they won just 11 games total a year ago. So initially, great start to the season. You know, the energy was positive. People were happy. And then they come home, just like you said, the struggles became very real. A 6-game losing streak. They lost 7 of 9. The salvation, interestingly enough, came from 2 Texas teams, your Rockets, and then the San Antonio Spurs most recently on Friday night, which was an in-season tournament game. And even though they've been struggling recently, they're I believe 89 on the year now, still a game below 500. They're very much alive for the in-season tournament, and I love the fact I'm all in. I'm officially fully bought into this. You're bought
into the in-season tournament. You're all about it.
Oh yeah, the marketing ploy worked on me. I'm 100% sucked in. Obviously, you can make improvements and stuff, but yeah, I mean, look, I don't remember
anything to add one more like legacy point to Steph Curry's career, right?
Well, I wasn't even thinking of it from that regard, but you're right. I mean, you could add that to it. I was thinking more so. It's like, you know, we're recording this on a late November Sunday night, and normally there isn't this much hype or buzz surrounding NBA basketball this time of year. I mean, there's been a discussion for years about how most people look at the NBA season unofficially starting on Christmas Day, but right now there are games being played that matter. Like the courts, as superficial as that may be in terms of highlighting a positive of this tournament. Look, the aesthetic is real. It's flashy. It's catchy. It's, you know, it's the whole thing. Even if it is just literally for show, even if it is a gimmick, it's awesome, man. I'm hooked in because there is going to be a braggadocio that comes from the team that wins this thing, right? I mean, you are going to have a fan base and a team that's going to be like, dude, we won the cup. We won I don't even know which call it. Is it a cup? Is it a trophy? Whatever it is. I'm all in. And the Warriors Tuesday night, huge game because they play the Kings, and the winner of that could win their group in advance to the quarterfinals. So I want to see the Warriors in Vegas, man. I think the Vegas tournament is where it's really going to be felt.
No, and it's been some exciting basketball. I agree. I'm not I want to see how it kind of ramps up as we get into the actual tournament itself and get out of this group knockout stage. But just to circle back to the beginning here, what's going on with the Warriors? Why have they struggled so much? Because that was kind of the first point here that we gotta address.
Did my dodge not work? Did my change of subject did not work? Okay, I tried. It was a valiant effort on my part. I'm going to pat myself on the back. Look, the Warriors are struggling for a myriad of reasons, and it's not their bench. In fact, their bench is outscored. The Warriors have played 17 games this season. Their bench has outscored the opposing bench in 15 of those 17 games. They would have outscored the Spurs this last game if it wasn't for Devin Vassell or Vasil, or I always mispronounce his last name, but he scored 24 points for the Spurs off the bench. The Warriors bench has been sound, but the starting unit has not. Last year, the Warriors starting five had the best net rating in the NBA. Now, people have been bringing that stat up a lot, and it's a bit out of context in the sense that the starting five didn't play together since December because of injuries primarily. So even though they had the highest net rating last year, the starting five, they also stopped playing together about almost less than halfway through the season. And then when we saw them together again in the postseason, the Lakers completely just wiped the floor. And then this year, the starting five, just look, Klay Thompson, if you watch Locked On Warriors, we've been saying this stuff for a month now that everyone else is starting to bring up. Like it's a very sensitive subject in the Bay Area. You're talking about a very revered player, a player that's going to have his own statue outside of Chase Center. But the reality is Klay Thompson is his numbers are the only year. Okay, let me try to phrase this the right way. The only year where the Klay Thompson's numbers have been were his rookie year. And people have brought up, bad starts to his seasons, right? And he's never been the most consistent player. He is a streaky shooter and scorer. But even the poor starts he's had in previous years, none of those compare to this year. So the Warriors have this huge problem with Klay Thompson, who may have peaked. And, the Warriors have to make these tough decisions about whether or not you're just going to rely on him and stick with him. Or do you start bringing up players off the bench and giving them more minutes who might be producing more. And Klay on the year, he's averaging 15 points a game. Again, that is not an all-star level, which Klay was talking about going into the season. And then the other player that's struggling mightily is Andrew Wiggins, a player that arguably was the second best player on the Warriors title team in 2022. Wiggins is averaging just 11.8 points per game. His three-point shooting on the year is at 25%. So those two players are fundamentally important in Steve Kerr's system. They're your wings that are supposed to be switch friendly. They're relied on for scoring. And right now, defensively, they've been average at best, and offensively, they've been mediocre. So when you look at the Warriors being in a game below 500, their bench is not the problem. Their bench has been fantastic, but their starting five is having issues.
So a myriad of issues here for the Warriors, kind of, and most recently compounded by a pre-existing beef here between Chris Paul, a long-standing beef between Chris Paul and NBA referee Scott Foster that came to a head recently in the Warriors' most recent of their losses against the Phoenix Suns, 123-115, which, midway through that game, Chris Paul gets into it with Scott Foster. They start chirping at each other, and then Scott Foster ejects Chris Paul. And Chris Paul had this to say after the game.
Yeah, it's personal. Yeah, we had a situation some years ago, and it's personal. You know what I mean? Like, the league know, everybody know, it's been a meeting and all that, and it's just a situation with my son, and so it's, so I'm okay with a ref talking, saying whatever, saying just don't use a tech to get your point across. You know what I mean? So I got to do a better job making sure I stay on the floor for my teammates. But, yeah, that's that.
You said it's a situation with your son?
Yeah, they know what it is. He know what it is, too. So
we don't know what it is.
Yeah, it's just I had a meeting with him, my dad, Doc Rivers, Bob Delaney, and all us, so, yeah.
Scott Foster?
Yeah, him too.
Was that back when you were with Houston?
With the Clippers.
Clippers.
So.
Did you come come out of that meeting thinking?
It was a whole thing, man, but it's still been a thing for a while. So I ain't saying nothing to get fined, huh? Yeah. Yeah, it is what it is at this point.
Okay, so Chris Paul's thoughts on the interaction, altercation, whatever you want to call it, with Scott Foster. And you even heard one of the reporters asking, was this a situation back in Houston? And he goes, no, this has been the thing since the Clippers days, and this has been a thing that's followed him throughout his entire career. He is 0-14. He's never won a single playoff game that Scott Foster has officiated. A long-standing beef that Rockets fans are well accustomed to their issues with Scott Foster historically, especially when Chris Paul was a part of the team. Now the Warriors are on the other end of the stick. They're dealing with Chris Paul and this long-standing issue. Cyrus, just your thoughts on what this, it's just a bad look for the NBA that they've got this feud with one of their lead officials, one of their most senior officials, and a player the stature of Chris Paul.
Yeah, I remember reacting that night. We do live post-game episodes, following every Warriors game with Locked On Warriors, and that night when that happened, I had to. I couldn't contain myself in terms of just the negative feelings I had towards Scott Foster, because nobody's paying to watch him officiate. No one cares about what the officials think. And the fact that the storyline of a basketball game centered largely on an official was just really disturbing to me. It's ridiculous. Like, if you be better, Scott Foster. Like, you should not be the primary focus, the arc of the story. It's mind-boggling to me. Like, he's an official. This is the same official, by the way, that I don't want to let go of the Tim Donaghy thing, in the sense that Tim Donaghy was making calls to Scott Foster all the way up until he got busted. And for some reason, Scott Foster got away with that. I'm speaking factually here. And the point is, Scott Foster, just please don't be a part of the story, regardless of whatever this animus here. The son thing is bizarre. Like, do you know what that means? I still have no idea how Chris Paul's son is involved in this. Do you? Because supposedly there was a transcription of at least some of the words said on the court that night, and his son was brought up in that transcription. So whatever is going on with his son is long simmering. Why Scott Foster has this, again, animus towards Chris Paul, none of us still knows, but it sucks. There's just no way to spin it. And until this year, Warriors fans never had a taste of this. You've been covering the Rockets for a long time. So now that I get the perspective of it, it's bitter. It's not cool. And I would love to know your thoughts, because all I've been hearing lately are from Warriors fans on this, or at least people covering the Warriors. Like, I mean, I'd love to know anything you want to add, because I'm sure the listeners would too.
It's just a thing where I firmly say the NBA has to figure something else out, man. Like, there has to be some kind of, the officials are one of the most untouchable groups of individuals anywhere, because they've got a union and all that, and they are never questioned. The moment you disagree with a call, they respond with a technical. It is a very messy situation that the NBA has to find a way to clean up, especially when you've got an official who is very clearly targeting and has a vendetta, an agenda, whatever, against a singular player. And this isn't the first time that we've seen issues with Scott Foster, right? Other players have had things to say about him. It's just, this is the loudest, most long-standing, player versus official that we've got going on, and the NBA has to step in and do something about it, at some point in time, because this ultimately, I don't think this thing can continue. But can the Warriors find a way to rebound from their recent struggles? Can Klay Thompson and Andrew Wiggins get back on track? And will the NBA ever actually step in to this Chris Paul versus Scott Foster beef? Y'all have covered for all of that and so much more over at Locked On Warriors. Cyrus, thanks for stopping by Locked On NBA with me.
Thank you, man. Always a pleasure. Anytime you want me, I'm available, sir.